Judah is an author, a professional speaker, a strategic advisor on the art of leadership and the science of breakthrough thinking. He is a founding partner at Riverine Leadership. He's a routine contributor to Fast Company, one of my favorite magazines, a regular guest at UC Berkeley School of Business, and he's an established instructor for the U.S. Army's Red Team Leadership Curriculum at the University of and Cultural Studies. Please join me in welcoming Judah.
Thank you all so much, and thank you for coming. I'm not afraid of moving around, but I have these two tape marks here where I'll stay in good light for the video. So just, if you notice me kind of stopping myself, that's all that's going on. So forgive me for that. We do live in an age where we're all supposed to be innovative, constantly, consistently. And there is an inherent paradox in that request of us, which is that the networks that our brain evolved in order to be innovative, the networks that our brain evolved and uses in parallel with one another to help us see the pattern for the noise, they don't work very well if we're constantly doing. They don't work very well if we're constantly on task, if we're constantly trying to achieve a single goal, if we never give ourselves downtime. And there are reasons for this. And so I want to show you a video that, for me personally, is the single best, most informative video about innovation. And I'm about to ask a question that is probably the most ridiculous question anyone has ever asked in Gainesville, Florida. Does everyone understand the rules of American football? Yes? We're good? Okay, I have to check this now and then. All right, here you go. Oops. We've lost it. I swear this worked when we were trying it. I swear to God, it worked when we were trying it. That is not my dog. Exactly. Okay, here we go. No, it is not me. Okay, can we show it one more time so everybody can watch it?
Is it real?
It is real. It is real. I just pulled it off of YouTube. It's grainy, which lets you know it's very real. It's very authentic if it's grainy.
Against the rule, correct?
Say again?
Obviously, it was against the rule.
Questionable. Questionable. But the thing that I find most interesting is the defense. Can you play it one more time? I want you to watch the defensive players. Right? They are paralyzed. They cannot figure out what is happening. And for me, this is what is so telling about this in terms of innovation. Here, somebody did something. Was it against the rules? Was it right on that line? Is it a gray area? My guess would be yes, and I'm sure the coach of the other team was screaming a mile a minute after that happened that something went wrong. You're not allowed to do that. However, the defense was like, we know what happens. They hike the ball, the quarterback goes back, we throw ourselves forward, they come at us, that's what happens. But suddenly, the ball has moved, but the offense hasn't moved. But the quarterback's moving, but forward and incredibly slowly as if nothing matters. And the defense, they stand up, right? They're like, and then they're just looking. And nobody can figure out what's going on until the quarterback starts to run. And then all of a sudden it's like, he's running, we chase. And they go. And this is what happens all the time in all of our lives. We have patterns that we use to understand the world, and we can't think of anything outside those patterns. Those defensive players were just stuck. So another example of this is beautiful night sky. And you've probably all maybe not seen something quite as amazing as that, because that was probably a long exposure and the naked eye can't see that. But you've all seen amazing night skies, and you've marveled at the sheer number of stars that you can see and how big the universe is. Maybe you started thinking about how small we are, right? And it goes on and on from there. But the reality is, every star you can see on the starriest night fits in that little circle there. That's how little of our own galaxy we're actually seeing, never mind the whole universe. And yet we look up into the night sky and we think, wow, look at how much we're seeing. We're seeing the whole thing. It's this mindset that consistently gets in the way of being innovative, that consistently gets in the way of us seeing things that are right in front of us, that consistently gets in the way of us searching for more things. I recently read this study where they put transmitters on wolf packs, and then they tracked them for a season. And then they mapped where the wolf packs went, and they put it on a map. They don't cross lines. And you think to yourself, oh, well, it's wolves, but I got news for you. We do the same thing. We mark our territory, and we tend not to go across the line. We tend not to invite people in across the line. And the fact is that innovation comes when we cross the lines, when we talk to people who are doing completely other things, no different than what would a different football play look like, or how many other stars are there that we're not looking at. What information is there that other people are holding? What other points of view, what other problems are people facing that we have no idea about because we don't actually engage, because we get siloed, because we don't have the ability to have that conversation. Innovation is so often about that openness, that willingness to look across at what's going on in a different discipline, what's going on in a totally different walk of life. I don't know how many of you know about the narrative medicine program at Columbia University, but it teaches medical students by reading novels. And the whole idea is you have to understand how to look at a whole person and read their story and understand what their story tells you about them if you're going to treat them. So again, it's this crossing of disciplines where it creates a tremendous amount of innovation, and yet we lock ourselves in far too often. And so it's having the courage to reach across and say, what are you up to? What are you doing? And then it's having the openness to say, how does that relate to what I'm doing? How might that have any effect on what I'm doing? Another great example of this is the West Bloomfield Hospital, Henry Ford Hospital, up in outside Detroit, was looking for a new CEO. And they hired a former executive from Ritz-Carlton Hotels. And at first you're thinking to yourself, Ritz-Carlton Hospital, that seems a little bit weird. I don't really know where they're going with that. But from their point of view, they were like, we take care of people. It's about their experience that matters. And the Ritz-Carlton hotelier brought in all kinds of innovative processes to West Bloomfield, and they started winning awards because of how he viewed the operation from a completely different point of view, from outside of where he was coming from. So this idea of opening yourself to that completely other way. Another story, this happened to me on the plane ride here. I get up to go to the bathroom. There are 3 bathrooms. 2 of them are red, they're locked, one's green. So I pull on it, and it kind of goes, we're back. And I'm like, okay, is somebody in there or is it broken? Because I don't want to make them feel uncomfortable. I know what that's like. That's terrible. But I also don't want to sit here like an idiot if no one's in there. So I'm sort of caught between this. I pull on it again, and it gets pulled back again. And this I'm like, okay, somebody's in there. I'm just going to kind of, right? And I'm going to look away. So when they come out, maybe it wasn't me, even though I'm the only one here. We all know that feeling. So who should come out first but that person? And it was a very lovely woman. She's like, I'm so sorry, it doesn't lock. I'm like, okay. So I go in, and I close the door. And so usually you lock it by pushing it towards where the door closes. But it wasn't working, so I just pushed it the other way just to see. And then the light turned on, and then I pushed, and the door was locked. It was counterintuitive. Something was definitely wrong, but it worked. This woman never pushed it the other way. She pushed it the way it usually goes. It didn't work. Door doesn't lock. End of story. And then she sat there for a very stressful bathroom experience. And you can just imagine her, right? Like, and then there I am pulling on the door, and she's pushing back, because she didn't just check. And that's the thing about this innovation mindset. It's like, well, okay, why not? I'm going to push it the other way. It's that willingness to just try it that has such a massive impact. Now, I could stand here all day and discuss with you why people are not willing to try it. But I have 20 minutes before you get to ask questions. So I'm going to move on from there. But feel free to ask questions about it. But I just want to point that out. This is a huge blocker. Because we're told, innovate, innovate, innovate. Don't screw up, don't screw up, don't screw up. We're constantly being given that mixed message in today's day and age. And there's another mixed message we're constantly given. So, trees pull water up out of the ground, and they then aspirate that as vapor from their leaves. A large tree in the Amazon, a mature tree, will release about 1,000 liters of water vapor every day. Now, they release that along with these things called terpenes, which are basically like rain-seeding molecules. So trees are kind of responsible for rain. Now, this water vapor goes up, floats over the Amazon, hits the Andes, rains, refills the Amazon River. There is more water floating over the Amazon River than there is water in the Amazon River. I want you to take a moment and just sit with that thought for a second. There's more water floating over it. Now, why would I bother telling you this in a talk about innovation? The reason I'm telling you this is because these are the sorts of things we need to be curious about. Not because they relate in any direct way to what we're doing, but because they're going to spark a whole other way of thinking. You are practicing the art of taking in information in a totally new way. You are practicing the art of looking at things in ways you didn't imagine, so that when it comes time to innovate in your field, you are practiced at looking at things in a brand new way. I always like this one. Right? Step 2, a miracle occurs. And what does the scientist say? He's like, you need to get more specific here. Which again, this is the great paradox of our modern world. Be innovative, lay it all out, but get really specific and tell us how you do it. I have interviewed countless innovators. I have read accounts of countless innovations. And consistently, there is a moment, or a number of moments, in the process when stuff just shows up. Things just appear. And it's always when somebody's not focused on the problem. And you all have this experience. You've all had that moment in the shower. You've all had that moment when you're just waking up. You've all had those moments where you're just like, oh, now I kind of get it. And there's a reason for that. You have 2 networks in your brain that are majority involved in innovation. The first one's called your executive network. You're all familiar with it. It's right up here in the front. And it is what keeps you on task. It's what focuses you. It's what makes sure you pick people up at the airport on time, or pick up your kids on time, or get to class on time, or get to work on time. It's what has you focus on the work you need to get done. Return emails. Be sure you get something in when it was supposed to get in. It was under budget. Get the laundry done. Make sure you have dinner. Go to sleep when you're supposed to, or not. When you get drunk, this is the part that goes quiet. And what happens when this part goes quiet and that social inhibition goes away? You do things you ordinarily wouldn't do. Now, when the front goes quiet, not just when you're drunk, but when the front goes quiet, like when you're daydreaming, this other network turns on called the default mode network. And it's called that because when you're not focused on something, your brain defaults to using this network. What's amazing about this is, let's say you're reading a book in a hammock and you start daydreaming. When you were reading the book, you were using, let's say, 90% energy towards your brain doing what you were doing. When you then daydream, you're using 85% of the energy. Your brain is almost as busy when you're daydreaming as when you're focused on something. This daydreaming is when this default mode network turns on. This daydreaming is when you start to look at things from multiple angles. Your default mode network is made up of about 10 different brain regions. It's taking in autobiographical memory. It's taking in sensory information, error prediction, future prediction, empathy, your own sense of your awareness, what they call metacognition, your awareness that you are you, self-referencing. All of these things start talking to each other. And they start moving around each other, and they start saying, well, what if we tried this? Well, what if we tried that? Well, what if we tried this? What about that? And this is where you get your aha moment from, is from this network. This network that isn't really able to do its job fully if you stay focused and on task all the time. So this is that paradox I was talking about. We're in an age where we have to be productive. We're in an age when we have to be focused. We're in an age where we have to accomplish and do, and yet our brains evolved to accomplish and do in an innovative way by actually stepping back, by taking a moment, by resting. And we don't give ourselves the time. We don't value it. We feel like we're doing something wrong if we step back, if we give ourselves that break. And yet whenever you talk to people who are really innovative, they've all got ways of allowing themselves time to do that. Whether they do it early in the morning, or they do it late at night, or they take 20-minute showers, which some people do in San Francisco, which is really not cool because we're living in constant drought, but that's another story. No matter what, you have to find the time, you have to allow it, and you have to value it. Because this is how your brain is going to give you that kind of aha. And the last little piece I want to give you is this idea of the miracle occurring. When Prometheus stole fire from the gods, obviously he got punished. They sent the ravens to eat out his liver every day. Not a good fate. That's a side note. But the word for fire in Greek is techne, root of our word technology. Prometheus stole technology from the gods. And Zeus saw this and was like, well, cat's out of the bag on that one. What am I going to do? And so he gave humanity reverence. That was the antidote to being given technology, was reverence. Reverence is not a word you hear a lot in our day and age. We live in a very irreverent age. And yet the idea of being given the responsibility of something like technology, the idea of being given the responsibility of innovating technology without proper reverence is dangerous. Now, what you have reverence for, that's personal choice. That was not true in ancient Greece, but we're in modern America. It's personal choice. But the idea of having reverence, and what I mean by reverence is a sense that we are a part of something larger than ourselves, that we are co-creating this world with that thing which is larger than ourselves, and that we do not have the capacity to understand all of it. And from that is a sense of both responsibility and a sense of perhaps moving a little bit more slowly. Because what I have found is it's almost irresponsible for me to talk about innovation and not bring this piece up, because we are moving so quickly towards things that are very difficult. I don't know about you, but I've had conversations with friends who are in particular situations where they're having to make decisions that no one has had to make a decision about before. Technology has enabled us to end up in situations we did not evolve to decide. And now here we are having to make those decisions because technology has been taken from a place that we may or may not have had a right to take it from. And so to bring that reverence forth is very important. And so this idea of like, this is when a miracle occurs, that's kind of true. When we innovate, there's a part of us that is pulling something new into the world from somewhere else. Yes, we have logic behind it. Yes, we have reason behind it. Yes, we can explain why it works and how it works. But that spark of an idea, if you get innovators drunk and that social inhibition goes quiet, they'll admit it. They're like, I don't know where it came from. I've been working on it and working on it and working on it, and then they get kind of quiet because they don't have the words, because we don't live in a society that enables or allows for that, but they all say it. They're like, and then it just sort of showed up. And I knew it was right, but I didn't know why. But it guided me. And to have reverence for that process is incredibly important. Because without that, we wind up with technology that doesn't have a compass. And so this is a piece that gets left out a lot when we talk about innovation, because we're rushing towards it so quickly. We want to achieve it so quickly. But to have that reverence is very important, and it works both ways. If you have that reverence, you will have much more access to your default mode network, which will then give you those answers you're looking for. So it's this interesting two-way street. And that is the super fast talk, and I'd like to open it up to any questions you might have.
So Zeus, in retaliation for that, gave his sister Pandora a box
Yeah.
and said, whatever you do not open that.
Don't open the box, Pandora.
Pandora opened that box and released the core on the world. So he
Yeah.
got it back that way.
But there was something else at the bottom of that box that crawled out at the very end. It was hope. He shoved hope in the bottom of the box so that we would have that as well. And the Greeks were great at this. The Greeks were great at laying out the paradox of being human. We're able to do these amazing things. We're able to do these horrible things. We're stuck in both and trying to hold that. And what I have found is that, especially because I'm based in San Francisco, so we've got Esalen and the human potential movement just to the south of us. We have Napa Valley and its wine, and Mendocino and its marijuana just to the north of us. So there's a lot of interesting stuff that happens in the San Francisco area around people trying different things. And the people, this is why a lot of the innovators I talk to will mention having these experiences that they can't quite explain, that didn't come out of nowhere. They've been working really, really hard on something. But then there are these miracles in the middle when something just arrives. You know, in the famous story of Mendeleev, who was working on a chemistry textbook for 3 years, was trying to figure out the best way to lay out the known elements, and then fell into a nap that he referred to as a fever dream, and was shown the periodic table, and woke up and wrote it down. Now, the fascinating thing about the periodic table is that it wasn't just a table that laid out the known elements. There were all these blank spots in it when he was shown it. And what he said is, you will find elements with those atomic weights in those empty spots. He dreamt this. And then sure enough, we started finding elements in exactly those spaces. I'm not asking you to believe a specific thing. I'm not explaining how that happened. I'm just saying this is an essential part of the process. And we've actually identified the brain network that does this. And we now know how you can access that network to bring this in. So you don't have to go to Northern California and burn incense and meditate on this sort of stuff to access it. And that's what a lot of stuff in the book is about. There are very normal ways to access this part of it. But it's essential from an innovative point of view to access this part of it. And I want to give you an example of how unused this muscle is. So I want you to imagine that gravity stops working at 10 p.m. and then it starts working again at 7 a.m. That's the physical law of our universe. How did our culture evolve? How's our culture different? What's our technology look like? A lot of weighted furniture. A lot of people inside by 10. You're still going to float in the house, though. So what's the house look like? Padded ceilings. Lots of Velcro. No liquids after 10. Very different night shift. Solar system would fall apart. That is true. You ask this question to a group of kindergartners. You ask this question to a group of 6th graders. You can't shut them up. Right? It's another version of the marshmallow castle. Just go. But all of our social inhibition gets in our way. All of our lack of habit gets in our way. We don't have the neural loops that allow us to just kind of bust open and imagine this, which is what makes it hard to be innovative, because we don't play these games. These are important games to play. I had the opportunity to talk to this guy who was kind of Steve Jobs' right hand for about 20 years. Very good friend with him. Actually tells a very funny story where Steve Jobs was dead set against putting apps on the iPhone. He forbid it. And so this guy jailbroke his first iPhone and put apps on it, and then went up to Steve Jobs like, look what I can do with my phone. You can't do that with yours, because you don't have apps. And he told me that when they were coming up with their general concept that became the juggernaut that is Apple today, the executive team would have all kinds of conversations, but they would have conversations like, what's a better city, Tokyo or Paris? What's a better fruit, an apple or a banana? Now, you might say to yourself, what on earth does that have to do with Apple's strategic vision in the future? But for them, it was all combined. They were just thinking about the world. They were thinking about how the world works well, how it doesn't work well, what they like about it, what design looks like in different places. They were opening up the possibilities from multiple disciplines, multiple lines of thought. If you just sit with this question, just ask yourself this question once a day, you're actually doing the work to get more innovative, even though this clearly has nothing to do with anything anyone in this room is working on. Because as somebody back there said, the solar system would fall apart. This is the kind of stuff it takes. These are the kinds of questions you have to play around with in order to break that open, to allow yourself to build the neural muscle to get better at these things. We're constrained by the currency of our environment. Can you elaborate? So your imagination is limited by the constraints of the world. 30 years ago, people did not imagine fiber optic networks. Now here they are, having changed everything. And it's true, there are certain things you can't know. But A, there are many things you can just imagine. What if we were able to send way more amounts of data over wires than we can right now? What would the world look like? Well, somebody thought of fiber optics, exactly. Right? Somebody's playing. So while there are constraints to the reality, innovation always comes from people blowing those up and saying, let's pretend they're not there. And then see what happens. Right? And then we'll just look. Innovation very often comes from people who just don't really care what is real. And that's where that big blow up comes from. Right? Airbnb founders walk into Y Combinator, which is a big incubator in Silicon Valley. And they walk in and they're like, we want to make it so that people can invite strangers to stay in their homes. And the head of Y Combinator, Paul Graham, is just like, you kids are nuts. That is the stupidest idea I have ever heard. I would never let a stranger come stay in my house. Who would let a stranger come stay in their house? Get out of my office. And they said, all right. And they sort of, And one of them pulled out the cereal box. They had made these cereal boxes during the 2008 campaign, and they were Obama O's and Captain McCain's. And they were selling them, and they made about $40,000 in order to keep their company going. And they handed Paul Graham the box, and he said, what's this? And they told him the story, and he was like, all right, come back into my office. Because he said to them, he's like, you guys, it's not really a compliment, but he said, you guys are cockroaches. You're not going to die. If you were willing to do this, you're willing to survive. And that, I know, right? And that willpower is what I want to invest in, not necessarily your idea, which I still think is stupid. Not so stupid. Yeah, not so stupid. Yeah, and Paul Graham gets his cut, so it works out. But it's that sense of like, oh, somebody's willing to think way out there. Somebody's willing to try it. Somebody's willing to do it. And so to create a space that is safe enough for people to throw out ridiculous ideas. Tomorrow in the workshop, that's what part of it's going to be about, is how do you create that safe space where people can then throw out these crazy ideas, most of which are crazy, most of which are stupid, until one isn't. Different. Do you know the phrase true but useless? True but useless? It's a phrase. It's so true from a certain point of view, but kind of useless, right? But that's the idea, is that, yes, we need to build up tolerance for the mistake. We need to build up tolerance for the misunderstanding. We need to build up tolerance for the idiot idea. Because we need to allow the space to breathe in order for things to happen. This is both an internal and an external experience. So in external situations, we very often shut things down. Don't let people know things, but status keeps people from saying stuff, or concern that like I'm going to look like an idiot. But we do that internally already, and then the ideas don't even come out. We don't even allow ourselves to have the ideas. And then we look at somebody who did, and we're like, well, how did they do that? How did they think of that? And then sometimes the idea looks blatantly obvious later, but we still can't figure out how they did it, and it's because they allowed themselves to play games like this. They allowed themselves to just go off into crazy places. This is what I'm saying. Our society demands that we be more innovative and then proceeds to shut down all the different things that support us being innovative It's a terrible paradox. This is why innovation right now has been considered a young person's game. It's not. Our brains are perfectly capable of being innovative all throughout our lives. It's just that when you're 22, you don't know enough to know that you're stupid, right? Speaking from experience. And so they're the ones who are willing, they're like, what about this? Right? Like Snapchat. I don't know about the rest of you, but when Snapchat first came out, I was like, who cares? Apparently a lot of people did. I wasn't able to see it. But it's having an open enough space. Sometimes people ask me, what's special about Silicon Valley? I'm like, there's actually nothing special about Silicon Valley except for the fact that it's a land that doesn't say no. That's the only thing that separates Silicon Valley from anywhere else. Is in Silicon Valley, people are like, yeah, try it. I'll give you some money. Especially if you're a young white man, unfortunately, that's a huge problem we have out there. And so we have a lot of apps that fix problems for young white men. It's a whole other ridiculous issue. But in general, Silicon Valley just says yes. That's its big secret. And it lets the chips fall where they may. And people, it's a magnet for people who aren't afraid to look stupid. Will AI develop its own culture? I don't think we know, because I don't think we quite understand what creates our consciousness and our culture. So I don't think we know what's going to create, how AI could create a consciousness, and if it is a consciousness, how it might create culture. So I honestly feel like I can't answer that question for you. But this goes back to that thing about, I do believe that with the rapid ascent of artificial intelligence and the Facebook quagmire of privacy and personal data, this is one of the reasons I kind of talk about this reverence piece, that we need to actually take into account the world we're creating. Think about the world we're creating, because it's incredibly powerful, it's ubiquitous, and it's outrunning us. And I don't think we've really taken that part into account yet.
I think AI is already influencing our culture. I mean, Google results are controlled by artificial intelligence. The results you get when you do a search, and the algorithm that's used for that is having a tremendous effect on our culture. And a lot of people, like myself, get their news from sites like Google News. And how are they choosing the headlines that get posted on their front page? It's already happening. It's all around us.
It is. We still have choice. Like, you're making a choice to get your news from Google. You could actually choose to go directly to certain sites or listen to certain stations.
That's true. We do have an individual choice, but our country is still going to use Google, even if some individuals go elsewhere.
Yes. And so the question right now, from a political point of view, is how long are these companies going to be allowed to be as big as they are? Because we tend to break them up, and you can sort of see the political winds moving in that direction. And the other question is always, how long can any of these things really hold? The big five, as they're called, are trying to stop the culture of disruption that created them. It's kind of a funny little game they're playing, right? It's like, you let us destroy everything and get huge, now we want that to just stop. And the reality is that's probably not going to stop. And so we're probably going to see other disruptions come, other things shift. And I don't know what those are, but there is no question that AI is having a huge impact on what is going on around us, which again is why I bring up this point that, like, we do have choice. There is a sense in which we do know what's going on, but we don't actually take on that responsibility for ourselves. We don't have this sense of reverence, and that is one of the things that allows some of this stuff to happen.
So in terms of reverence?
Well, if you look at the founders or the CEOs of these companies, right? So we've got Larry and Sergey at Google. We have Jeff Bezos at Amazon. We have Bill Gates, so to speak, spiritually, at Microsoft. We have Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook. These are not compassionate people. These are not particularly connective people. These are people who like the way that their systems work. These are people who like to build worlds. These are people who like to control things. They think they have their values in order, and therefore that's good. This is why I'm saying I think we're moving towards breakups. We're sort of ready for a Theodore Roosevelt type, whoever that might be, to come in and be like, you're too big. It's just nothing is good for anyone when anything is that big, that type of idea. Will that happen or not? I don't know. But no, this is not, we do not live in an age of compassionate leadership. Blatant glimpse of the obvious, I know, but but this is not an age of particular compassion. This is not an age of particular reverence, right? And what I'm saying is that I think that combined with the technological speed at which we're operating, that's what's very dangerous. And I think that's what a lot of people feel. We live in the age of anxiety. The number of anxiety prescriptions, medication prescriptions, is out of this world. Why is everybody so anxious? Exactly. Right? That's an interesting question. Well, I think part of that anxiety is this sense of like, things are speeding up, AI is getting super powerful, and nobody seems to care. We just seem to be making it go faster. Years before this, I'm having a conversation with a guy. He's a designer who worked on the second generation Prius in the US, which is the Prius that really took off. And I'm asking him all kinds of questions. What do they do? Da, 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 da. But he said one thing that always stayed with me. He said that the entire design team was microdosing LSD the entire time they were designing the Prius, too. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? I'm like, first of all, what's microdosing? And microdosing is when you take what's a regular dose, you put it in a cup of water that's just like, let's say, 10 milliliters. You mix it all up, and then you pull out 1 milliliter each, and you take a tenth. He's like, the whole team. We did that the whole time we designed the second generation Prius. And I was like, oh. That explains a lot. And so there's a lot of that going on, but it's all subterranean. Nobody wants to talk about it. The same way I was talking about when you talk to scientists, like you can talk to neuroscientists, and they will talk about how, yeah, it was really weird. We were doing this experiment, and we caught brain activity here. I was like, what do you mean here? He's like, outside the skull. There was brain activity here. I'm like, did you do a study? He's like, what am I going to do, get kicked out of the school? No way. I've got a great appointment. I'm not touching that. But these things pop up, and then we're like, and so there's this element when we talk about innovation about like, where do these ideas come from? What is going on? I'm not standing up here saying it's God. I'm not standing up here saying it's the spirit of innovation. I'm not standing up here saying it's the Holy Ghost. But I'm saying that there's clearly something going on that doesn't fit cleanly into reason. We don't know exactly what it is, but every innovator I know is open to it in some way, shape, or form. And whether it's like a quote from Bob Dylan I use sometimes, and he goes, I don't know where the songs come from. It's like a ghost shows up, writes the song, and leaves. That's Bob Dylan talking like that, right? Or you get, there's this metallurgist who's a history of science guy from MIT who's like, oh yeah, dreams are one of the most important elements in scientific research. I'm like, and I'm like checking his credentials to be sure I have this straight, that this person at MIT is saying this. And he's like, yeah, dreams are a huge part of this. And then you go back and look at the literature, and there's a lot of stuff about dreams and breakthroughs. I don't know what it is, but clearly there's something more going on with dreams than just the reshuffling of memories, like some of the neuroscientists say, because too many good things have come out of them. Too many big breakthroughs have come out of them. It's more the preparation. I do get come to for crises, but it's not for innovation crises. It's for I'm going to kill someone crises. And it's a whole different line of work. But if companies come and they're curious about innovation, it's really about how to set up environments. What do we do to encourage this amongst people? What do we do to create a space where people feel more comfortable doing it? What do we do to create a space where we get more information out of more people? So that's what they're looking for, that sort of structural, organizational development structural element that allows them to get more innovation out of their teams. And then the question is, well, what's getting in the way in your culture? So then there's a cultural analysis to be like, oh, there's hero worship, and only the hero, whoever that is allowed to come up with the idea. Or it's a punitive culture, and so if you say something that isn't considered good, it's like a mark against you and you're not going to get promoted. Or you only get promoted because you say really wonderful things about the leader, and so you just wait for the leader to come up with an idea. So there are all these cultural elements that get in the way that you have to find and then redefine how they engage with each other. So, I mean, from my point of view, everything's fractal. So you can scale up and the same dynamics are going on. So at a city level, you've just got the same thing, like how much does status matter, right? Every city's got old power, whoever that might be in that city. How does old power feel about whatever changes the city might want? Do they want to be listened to? Do they want to be involved? Do they just have certain sacred cows? What would it take to go against them, right? Then there's elected leadership, and there's the question of who are they representing. Then what is the goal? What is the change you actually want to bring to the city? Because sometimes that can be assumed, but it's not actually understood well or agreed upon. So does the city want to be known as a tech hub? Does the city want to be known as a food destination? Does the city want to be known as simply being forward-thinking in terms of city planning, in terms of light rail, in terms of zero waste, in terms of greening, in terms of, so what are the actual goals? In getting really clear on those actual goals. And then there's the question of how do the people in the city actually talk to each other? So when it comes to city stuff, this is really a problem, right? And then the green circle has the power and starts making decisions, but has no idea what's going on for the red, white, and yellow group. And then the red, white, and yellow group are like, what did you just do? This is ridiculous. And then it's not that the green circle is cruel. The green circle just didn't ask, didn't invite them into the conversation. So on a city level, the first question is always, who's in the conversation? Is everyone in the conversation? There's a great phrase in the innovation world, which is nothing about me without me. So if you're talking about doing something, fixing a certain part of town, it's like we have to talk to the people who live there. What's going on there? What are their actual needs? There's a great story about Gatorade where in 2007, Pepsi owned it, and they were like, the brand was starting to sink a little bit. It had competition, and so they came up with all these new flavors, and they were pushing it out in their distribution network, but it wasn't working. And so then they went and they talked to the athletes, the people who actually drank it. And they're like, so what are you up to? They're like, well, I like to carb load in the beginning, and then I like to get protein afterwards. And so they created these gums and these bars that were more carb-oriented for before the competition. You had Gatorade for during the competition. And then they created protein bars and shakes for after the competition. Sales went right back up. Why? Because they actually went and asked the people who use it, as opposed to just assuming, here are the things we should do. Right? Here's all the stuff. And Gatorade's another great example of going against popular wisdom. At the time, it was believed you shouldn't actually hydrate during competition. Right? Sounds kind of nuts right now, but that's what was going on at the time. So when they invented Gatorade, they were going against what was considered to be known wisdom. So in the same way, it's like, what are we assuming makes a good city? What are we assuming other people would want in a city that is actually not true? So a big asking. Don't come in and be like, I think we should do this. That makes me innovative. No, what makes us innovative is going, so what's going on? What's hurting? What would you like to see fixed? What kind of a city would you like to live in? And from there, you start being innovative, right? That idea of living with the problem, having an actual problem to fix. That's a huge part of being innovative, rather than just, I want to be innovative. I want to be seen as innovative. Or, I think my city needs X, Y, and Z, so let's do something. And having the patience to ask those questions, having the patience to really learn, what am I trying to fix exactly? Right? It's that, I think it's Einstein, but who knows? We attribute everything to Einstein. But it's like, if I had an hour to fix a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes defining what it is, and then 5 minutes fixing. Same thing is true on a city level. What's actually broken? What's the real cause? What needs to be innovated? And then, how do we have those conversations? There are all these tools that allow for these conversations to take place, that allow for these conversations to move more smoothly. And there are all these tools that allow for real idea generation, not just idea generation from the biggest names in the room, so that everybody else stays quiet. We do a lot of work like this in the Army where status is huge, and you're wearing your status literally on your uniform. And so what we do is we bring these things in, and 3/4 of the time, the winning idea comes from the lowest ranking member in the room, because the lowest ranking member in the room is the one who actually knows what the problem is. Everybody else is too high up to really have a sense of it. And so it's getting into that reality. So part of it is realizing that the fear is misplaced. So what Kodak misunderstood is that their business wasn't film. Their business was memory. Right? If they had understood that their business was helping you maintain your memories, keep your memories, then digital would have made a lot of sense. But they thought, no, we make film. So very often the fear comes because you misunderstand what your own business is. You misunderstand what you're actually offering, and then you're worried that you're going to cannibalize what you're offering, as opposed to recognizing, oh no, this is moving forward. We're having a conversation today about Studebaker, and how I didn't know that Studebaker, the car, started out as a wagon company, horse and buggies. They were making the buggies. And it was brothers. It was brothers, and one of the brothers was like, I saw this automobile, I think that's the future. And the other brothers were like, you're crazy. We got to stick with our wagons. And they started out even before that making wheelbarrows for the gold rush. But what they did was they decided to hedge their bets and let one of the brothers move forward making cars. And they did. And then it turns out Studebaker was actually an incredibly innovative car company. They put a lot of things in years before other companies did, because they recognized that their business was transportation. It didn't matter how you were transporting, if it was a wheelbarrow or a carriage or a car. The point was, we do transportation. So a lot of the fear comes from this narrow-minded focus. A lot of the fear comes from this, not recognizing the sheer breadth of the universe you're in, not seeing it from a big enough perspective, and worrying that you're going to take away from yourself. Apple could have said, we don't make phones, we make computers. That's crazy. But instead, they were like, no, this is what we do. So the fear really, I find the fear comes from a misunderstanding of what we really do. And so if you're like, I'm afraid to do that, the answer is to really step back and say, well, what am I afraid the consequence is going to be? And then say, is that really a consequence to my current line of business? What is my current line of business? Maybe it's something much broader and larger than I realize. And so this change actually, if this is my playing field, I have a lot more room for change and innovation than if this is my playing field. So I think if you're looking at an innovation and you're experiencing fear, the first thing to do is step back and say, how big is this space I've created? How large a playing field do I understand my work is in? Because very often we make it too narrow.
So join me in thanking Judah for his time this evening. It's incredible.